Peace, family. We back. All right, we finna continue talking about the controversy of the identity, the scientific identity of the Hebrews. Now, like I said before in the last video, we have to basically go back in time, if you would, but also back in the Bible. We're not going to deal with the creation of the world and anything like that. We're going to deal with the creation of humanity, dealing with Adam and his progenitors. Not his progenitors, but the people who came after him, because he is the progenitor of the human race. All right. Now, we all know that Adam had a wife. Adam also had 3 sons in the beginning, right? And we have to basically, use the documentation of the Bible, but we're also going to use the documentation of the scholars that I named. One in particular, one of the scholars that I named, Dr. Sheikh Anta who was a very, very world-renowned scholar. He wrote a book called Civilizations of Barbarism. And in that particular book, he highlights the creation of humanity and gives the time periods and the actual place where humanity was born. In the book, he highlights that the human race began in Africa, in the area of Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania, which is right around the closest area by the equator, where it is hot, it is very, very warm and humid. We all know that Africa is a very, very warm place. It is called the cradle of civilization and also the cradle of humanity, because not only was humanity born in Africa, but civilization was created and born in Africa. Now, in the Bible, it itemizes the creation of Adam. And we're not going to get so deep into the narrative of the Bible. We're just going to highlight these particular characters so that we can fast forward and itemize the timelines of specific characters, how old they live, because we do know that in the Bible it highlights that people lived up to and including about 1,000 years. Now, we got to really pay close attention to that. Do we really believe that human beings lived that long? Do you really believe that? And being a religious person, you have to believe certain things like that if you're going to follow word for word and trust the Bible from a perspective, from a literal perspective. Literally think that people live that long. We have the flood story. We have all of the narratives about the wickedness that happened in the earth, the wickedness that happened as a result of the wickedness in the earth, where God said that man, his spirit will not strive with man, for he is also flesh. So he's going to take his timeline or his age down, or his lifespan down to about 120 years. All of these things. That's the narrative. We're not going to get into that, but we're going to highlight the narrative that it says that people live about up to and include about 1,000 years. Now, this is very, very significant, because when you look at that, there's always a motive of the writer. The motives of the writer of the writers of the Bible is very significant. And just as a result of saying that, I want to highlight this scripture. It says in the Bible that holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost, meaning that they wrote the Bible based upon godly inspiration. Okay, So, just because I'm highlighting that, I'm just highlighting that to kind of touch bases with those who believe and kind of give them uh, a certain level of credit for their faith, but not saying that these things are necessarily true. You see what I'm saying? So, one thing that I want to say as we begin to dive into this is that the book of Genesis is a book of genetics. Genesis means the beginning, but it also means the beginning of the genetics of mankind. You see what I'm saying? This is why when you start getting into certain sons and fathers and progenitors of this people and that people, you begin to go down the lineages of specific families. Now, in this case, we're going to deal with Adam. Adam had a wife called Eve. We're not going to get into, the situation and the controversy between Adam, Eve, and the serpent and all that. We'll come back to that because it is very, very necessary. But we're going to reserve that, for a later study as we highlight who these particular Hebrews are. Okay, so we know that Adam had 3 sons. 2 of those sons was Cain and Abel. Cain was said to be the firstborn, or was spoken of first, and Abel the second son. Okay, we also know that Cain killed Abel as a result of, him being angry. Some speculate say that he was jealous because God, accepted Abel's sacrifice, or his not just his, well, I guess you could say his sacrifice, accepted his above Cain's. Okay, so Cain killed Abel, and the saga continues. And then Adam ended up having another son whose name was Seth. Okay? Now, mind you, from Adam to Noah is 10 lives, 10 men, right? And these particular 10 men were said to have lived close to 1,000 years, most of them living about 900 years. And then you have Methuselah living, he lived the longest, and then you have Enoch living about 365 years. Ironically, it's the same amount of time. When you condense it, you got 365 days in 1 year, but he lived 365 years. So why is this important? This is important for us to embark on an allegorical journey, because what I'm saying is that the book is metaphorical and allegorical. Okay, so let's go through the lineage. After Cain killed Abel, right? Or let's go back a little bit before that. It's said that Adam and Eve were the only people on the planet before they had their children, right? I'm saying from an allegorical perspective, if the Bible is allegorical, which it is, then there had to have been more people on the planet at that particular time, because once Cain killed Abel, he ended up leaving and going to the land of Nod and ended up getting married. So in the process, we have to understand that there is another group of people that are alive, and also there are more people on the planet. Okay, so keep that in mind. So after Cain kills Abel, Cain goes into exile. He becomes a vagabond. He has a mark upon him, right? And he ends up going into the land of Nod, and then you have the lineage of Adam that seemingly starts over with a man called Seth or Set, right? Seth. You can pronounce it and say it whichever way, Set or Seth. All right. And Noah, who is the father of three, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah is said to be the eighth from Adam in the Bible. But when you calculate and you add these men up, he's actually the 10th. Okay? So, after Adam, Cain, and Abel, the lineage begins with Seth. Right? So we're not going to calculate Adam's lifespan. I mean, not Adam. We're going to calculate Adam's lifespan, but we're not going to calculate Abel's lifespan, and we're not going to calculate Cain's lifespan. But we are going to calculate Seth's lifespan, and we're going to calculate Adam's lifespan. Okay, so after the death of Abel and Cain is exiled, they have another son called Seth. Seth begets Enos. Enos begets Canaan. Canaan begets Belial. Belial begets Jared. Jared begets Enoch. Enoch begets Methuselah. Methuselah begets Lamech. Lamech begets Noah. And then Noah begets Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Why is this important? What makes this so important is because these men are said to have lived up to and including approximately about 1,000 years. Allegorical. I do not believe it. I know it's not true. What is the motive of the writers? According to Sheikh Anta or Sheikh Anta Joke, humanity began, or life began, about 3.5 billion years ago. And then you fast forward up to about 150,000 years. Then you have what is called the Grimaldi man that comes into existence. Now, why is this important? This is important because of the creation story in the Bible when you're dealing with Adam. Adam is said to be a black man, or is known to be a black man, as a result of the fact that the creation of the black man or humanity happened in Africa. Like I said, in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. You cannot be a white person and survive, or a white humanoid and survive in an equatorial region such as Africa. You will be destroyed by the blistering heat of the sun. So that man had to be black. He had to be covered in melanin in order to be able to absorb the ultraviolet rays of the sun and survive, right? So, with that being said, about 40,000 years, you have the arrival of the Grimaldi man in Europe. So the Bible highlights and dictates the traveling of humanity from Africa to people different parts of the world. This is what's going on in the Bible. Okay? So, from Adam to Noah, you have this culmination of human beings that are born and that begin to travel and leave a certain area of their inception and go into different parts of the world. Not to mention the flood story that's going to take place that I'm going to speak about in another video. Okay, I just want to basically highlight the time periods of these ages of these particular people, these 10 people, and then another 8 people from the line of Shem, right? Because the Bible, even though it gives a layout of the children of Ham, and it begins to go in and talks about how Ham had the sons called Cush, Mitzrayim, Punt, and Canaan, which are 4 sons, which is the land of Canaan, which his name is Canaan. You see, he has 4 sons, and before the flood, it shows a civilization being born and being birthed and flourishing. This is before the flood, right? So, with that being said, let's jump into these particular 10 people, including Noah, from Adam, right? So, these particular men, all the way up until Noah, live approximately up to and including about 1,000 years. And when you add the years up from Adam, skipping over Cain and Abel, don't add their years. You only add set years and the rest of the men up into Noah. You get approximately 8,575 years. And then from them, from Noah, you have Noah's lineage through Shem. Now, I'm not going to say, well, I will say, I'm not going to say that I don't know why they don't add the ages of Nimrod. They don't add the ages of Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan. But they isolate Shem and give his lineage and then give the ages of them, right? There's a reason for that. So from Adam, skipping over Cain and Abel, to Seth all the way to Noah, you have approximately 8,575 years. And then the lineage of Shem from Noah, you have approximately 2,273 years. Now, when you add those two numbers together, you get 10,848 years. Come on now. We going somewhere now. Why is that? Why did the Spirit of God cause me to add those years up? Why? Because God wants us to know something. See, in the book of Genesis, you have what is called the antediluvian age. You won't get that term unless you go into Catholicism. The antediluvian age is the age by way of which you have the civilization, the first civilization known to man, that began and had its inception amongst the black people, amongst the Kemites, amongst the so-called Egyptians, right? People who established a powerful spiritual system, literary system, scientific system on every level, architecture, everything that a civilization has to offer was taking place during this particular time period, right? So in the course and period of time, you have the movements and the migration patterns. As they begin to learn and elevate in knowledge, they begin to move from Africa into the other parts of the world, going up into Europe and going over into the Western world by the Straits of Gibraltar, and people in populating the Americas, North America and South America, Australia, and all those lands in the West, right? And in the process of this, it took about 10,000 years. And this is why you have these men who are said to have come from Adam all the way unto Noah and the line of Shem to have lived approximately up to and including about 1,000 years. Now, make no mistake, the line of Shem, his age begins to diminish. Those people who come from Shem begin to diminish. I think the oldest in Shem's line lived about 250, 260 years and down. But like I said, when you add those 8 men up from Shem, you get about 2,273 years, and you add that to 8,575 years, you get 10,848 years. Listen, all of this is scientifically documented in the book Civilizations and Barbarism that describes to the letter the migration patterns of the first people on the planet. Now, let's get to this Noah character who represent a people. This is what I'm saying, right? So Noah had 3 sons. Noah had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham is said to be the progenitor of the black or the African race, right? Ham had 4 sons, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. Shem has a series of people from his lineage, which represents the Shemitic type, right? And Japheth has some people who come from his lineage. But what the scientific data shows is that Japheth is of the white race, right? Noah and Shem have a lineage as well. Shem, like I said in the past video, Shem means Shemitic. Shem represents the mixture of the race of people who come from Japheth. This is what's itemized. This is what's highlighted. This is what correlates with the Bible and the scientific data of the esteemed scholar, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop. Now, pay very close attention. See, because history is extremely important. Archaeological record is extremely important. Paleontological record, fossil records are extremely important. When you have the beginning of humanity, you have 6 specimens of humanity that were or have their being in Africa. 3 of them didn't acquire the knowledge or the understanding to be able to leave Africa. 2 of them died off and disappeared. And then you have the last, which is the 6th specimen, Homo sapien sapien. That is the humanoid or the specimen that was able to go and people other continents and other areas of the world, right? So what the scientific data shows is that they went into the areas of Europe at about 20,000 years ago. So you had the beginning of humanity about 40,000 years ago, which is represented by the Grimaldi man. And then right at about 20,000 years during the Wormian Ice Age in Europe. They were trapped in the Ice Age, and during approximately 20,000 years, those African people went through a mutation and became what is called Cro-Magnon man, which is the progenitor of the white race. Woo. Listen, you cannot get a Semite without the mixture of a white and a black. This is what the Bible is talking about. This is why Noah has 3 different types of human beings, races of people that are said to be his sons. Now we're going to get extremely deeper into who Noah is and what time period in the Bible that the narrators write in the Bible of where he comes from, what role he plays in this particular saga. Okay, so you have in the Bible, let me go to one of these scriptures. It says, and it came to pass in Genesis chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all that they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. That's the decline of the age factor. But what I'm saying, men have never lived longer than 120 years to about 130 years. You see, that's never been the case. Humanity has always lived approximately 120 years at the most, if you're healthy. You see, all of this 900 years, 800 years, those are the ideas and the agenda of the writers to create time periods by way of which they can mold and shape and fashion your understanding and implement and instill certain types of belief mechanisms inside of you that you might think that the Bible is speaking from a literal perspective, and then come in and instill some racist agenda in you as far as it concerns God's chosen people. Okay, so how do the Hebrews come into existence at this particular time, or as a process of this particular happening, as men begin to migrate into the other parts of the area, in the other parts of the world? Okay, so at verse 4 it says, there were giants in the earth in those days, and after that were the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they became children, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which are of old, men of renown. Where do we see? What does renown mean? Renown means famous. Renown means men who have stature and status in the world, right? So we already had men of status in the world because we had pharaohs at that particular time during that 10,000 year period where civilization already existed. Laws, statutes, and ordinances already existed, right? And the Bible describes that there was wickedness in the land as a result of the sons of God going into the daughters of men. And you got a lot of people, they think that these sons of God are the Nephilim. No, they're not spirits. They're not fallen angels. The Bible says that God makes his angels spirits, and his ministers the flame of fire. So what does that mean? Angels do not have flesh and blood. Angels cannot copulate with flesh. They can't do it. So why would the Bible say that they took them wives of all that they chose? It doesn't make sense. The sons of God are and have always been the Kemites. The Kemites were called the Saras, the sons of God. Who are the men? The men were the people of the white races. You have a term called human, and then you have a term called men. Hue means color. When you describe a person as a man in general in those days, then that would have represented someone of the white race, right? So the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took upon them wives all that they chose. Black men were beginning to copulate with fair-skinned women that came from the mutation. Hear me now. From the mutation of the black folk who were caught in that ice age. In around 10,000 BC, when the Wormian ice age began to abate, these people migrated back down into the warmer climates and began to pillage and go to war in the land of Canaan. Because remember, Canaan is a son of Ham, right? They began to go down into those areas and begin to make war and disrupt the peace and the societies of the land of Babylonia. And I didn't really go into that, but Nimrod was the person who established Babylonia. See? Which was the land of the Chaldeans. And we already know that the land of the Chaldeans was a land that was populated first by African people. But during the process of this amalgamation, you had the Akkadian Empire that came about, and Sargon of Akkad, who is the biblical Nimrod, was a Semite. He was a Semitic person. And this is what the Bible describes. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, they bare children unto them. The same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown, which simply means he came from the bloodline and lineage of the amalgamation of the African pharaohs that had already been ruling the planet. He had their genetics in him, which gave him a certain spiritual hierarchy, if you would, in that particular area of Mesopotamia to be able to establish a kingdom. So Sargon of Akkad was one of the first men of renown in that particular region. He was a Semite, right? We haven't even gotten to the birth of the Hebrews yet. But in the process of this amalgamation, this is where your Hebrew identity is going to come from. This is where your Hebrew personage is going to come from, right? So, as I said, all of the people from Adam to Noah, with the exception of Cain and Abel, beginning with Adam, skipping over Cain and Abel, to Seth, all the way to Noah. And then Noah's son, Shem, and his progenitors, when you add those years together, you get about 10,000 years. And those years represent the time period that it took, listen to me now, that it took for the Wormian ice age to dissipate, and from 40,000 years for the Grimaldi man to mutate into the Cro-Magnon man, and then those Cro-Magnon, the prototype of the white race, to migrate back down into Mesopotamia where the Cushites were. Who were the Cushites? The people in Canaan. The people in Canaan. Who were the Japhetic tribes? Those were the Cro-Magnon people, the progenitors of the European races. You do not get a Shem without a Japhet mixing with a Hamite. This is what the science is saying. This is what the Bible is narrating and articulating. Get rid of your belief system. Get rid of your ideologies about the Bible. The Bible is plain. I'm not going to say it's plain, but these people understand and they know what they are writing. And they switch up the time periods so that you won't necessarily know what comes first and what comes second. But when you study the Bible from a scientific lens and a scientific perspective, you understand what's going on when you have the scientific data that our ancestors put down and wrote. Right? So get the book. Get the book, Civilizations of Barbarism. And I'm not finished. I'm about to end this video. Like, share, and subscribe, because I'm going to come back and I'm going to begin to detail some of the things that I have been talking about where these particular characters come from, the parts and roles that they play, in the Bible, how the civilizations came about, the narrative about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and all these particular things now, because you got to understand the knowledge of good and evil was not some wicked thing. It was something that the knowledge of life, scientific information, and all these particular civilized items, if you would, were already a part of society before the flood, right? Before the flood story. And then we're going to show what the flood actually was. Was the flood more than rain? You see what I'm saying? How did the flood come into existence in the Bible? Right? Again, Shem, the Shemitic son of Noah, came from the mutation of the Grimaldi black man that was trapped in a Wormian ice age in Europe as they migrated from Africa 40,000 years ago after they went into that region. They got a movie out called 10,000 BC where they show you this. They literally show it to you. The white people in the movie have dreads, indicating the mutation. Right? So listen, man. Listen. I stayed up for y'all to try to get y'all a little bit of this. I probably kind of sporadically laid it down to you, but all of this stuff can be documented. Not only can it be, it has been documented, but you can go and authenticate it yourself, and I'll give you, the dates, that correspond with the Bible from the book. I'll give you the names of the book, the references, the authors, all of these things, so that you can realize and understand where this term Hebrew comes from, where it originates, because that's what we're dealing with. We haven't got to the depth of the Hebrew culture and the Hebrew personage, but I'm showing you how the Hebrew came into existence. And then I'm going to show you how and why they were chosen. Peace, family.